Okay, I'm going to give you an update on the segment 1 activities that are going on in the river. So this is the segment right along the plant site. We started activities there last year, as you're aware of. So I'm going to give you kind of a quick overview of what those remedies are, what activities were completed in 2012, and then what the plans are for 2013. There were 6 SMAs, sediment management areas, identified in segment 1 as depicted on this map. SMA 1 was, the remedy selection was a cap. For SMA 2 and 3, as well as 6, the remedy selection was DNAPL removal and treatment and installation of physical containment, which was a cap and sheet piling. And then also for hydraulic controls. And SMA 4 and 5 were also cap selections. So I'm going to talk about the DNAPL recovery first at SMAs 2, 3, and 6. So this map depicts those locations, as well as 4 and 5, which we won't come back to this map. So last year, we went into the SMA footprints and installed a series of wells that was gridded out that covered the entire footprint of the SMA, really evaluating for the presence of DNAPL. If DNAPL was identified, additional wells were installed at a tighter grid, up to 10 feet by 10 feet in those locations. The wells were continued to be installed at that tighter grid until no more DNAPL was encountered. And then product recovery was put into operation where on typically a daily frequency, and in some wells, if we were able to recover them quick enough, we would pump more than once a day. So we would be pumping and removing the DNAPL from out of the sediments. We began installing the wells in June of last year. It took us a little bit longer to get going. This year we're actually in the water working already. We worked on the DNAPL recovery until the end of November when we demobilized, basically because of weather concerns, weather conditions. 240 wells, total wells were installed, and a number of those actually produced DNAPL. In all 3 SMAs, we were able to remove DNAPL. Just real quick, a few pictures. This is the access site that we had located, we installed on the river during the operation, and the boat there is the drill rig that we used to install the wells. This shows one of the SMAs where the initial wells were going in when we were evaluating for the location of DNAPL. This is one of the containment devices on the boats that we used to pump the material from the wells. This was used as a secondary containment. The material was either pumped into sample jars, because it's typically a very small volume that you can get per well, or 5-gallon buckets if the well is producing a larger volume. In SMA 4, we installed a cellular containment system cap, using a geocell type material, which we talked about last year as well. And in 5, we installed a more traditional sand and armor stone cap. So SMA 4 footprint is depicted there, as well as the SMA 5. This picture shows the beginning of the installation of the geocell cap in SMA 4. And this is near the end of the installation, so the black material you see under the water, that is the geocell itself. Another picture when the project was completely done. And then this picture was a few weeks later. You can see the sediment. We've talked about the active bed, the small amount of sediment that's always moving along the bottom of the river, had already filled in about 50% of that geocell. So the geocell cap basically catches that native sediment moving, captures it, holds it in place, and that's how it caps the area, stabilizes it. SMA 5 was a more traditional sand and stone cap. You can see in this picture we had to basically bring a road in and install a road into the river and on the bottom of the river using crane mats so that the equipment could get in the river and actively, move around the footprint to put the sand and stone down. There's a picture showing the off-road truck vehicle backing up to the excavator, where he would then pull the stone out of the back of the truck and then spread it out over the footprint. Okay, so that's just a real quick recap of what we did last year. In 2013, our plans are to continue the DNAPL recovery in SMAs 2, 3, and 6. And I'll get into more detail in a few minutes. Install the containment systems at 2, 3, and 6, and also implement some hydraulic monitoring at those locations. So this shows you where SMA 2, 3, and 6 are. So for the DNAPL recovery, which has already started, we will install a series of wells again at the locations where DNAPL was identified through the efforts last year. We won't be spending the time out there searching for it. We've got it very well mapped out with GPS coordinates where we had identified and found the DNAPL and was performing DNAPL removal last year. We'll go back to those locations. We are putting in wells at a higher density. So they're 5 foot by 10 foot. We still need to have room to get the boats in between them, but we are putting them at a higher density in one of the locations so that we can remove more material in a shorter period of time. And these will be pumped on a daily basis. We started site mobilization and setup on April 30th. Well installation started on May 13th. We were about a week behind our target due to the high river levels that we had this spring, and they continued to be high into early May. In SMA 2, all of the wells have been installed that are going to be installed in SMA 2, and the DNAPL recovery is in progress, and we're currently working on SMA 6 to install the wells in SMA 6. This is a picture from a couple weeks ago when they were installing the access point and the docking system. This is another picture of the drill rig this year, and another picture of the drill rig. The installation of the containment systems. The containment system will come after the DNAPL recovery is completed, and it consists of sheet pile installation around the perimeter of the SMA for the lateral containment to isolate the material and keep it from moving within the sediments. A cap will be installed, a low permeability cap. This is for vertical containment. And then there will be hydraulic monitoring performed to determine whether or not we have maintained or met our goals for hydraulic containment of those SMAs. These were some pictures we shared, a while ago when we were still looking at the different remedy options. If you look at that dashed line as the footprint of the SMA, and you have to view this as if you can see through the water to the bottom. So sheet pile, they're not quite that wide when they go in, is installed basically around the perimeter, and it's tied into the existing sheet pile that runs along the shoreline, which is the Regis sheet pile here. So it provides this lateral containment system on all 4 sides of the SMA. This is a cross section of that area, so I'm going to start from the right and go to the left. The Regis system is here, and the sheet pile that exists there now for the Regis system. This is the new sheet pile that encompasses the other 3 sides of the SMA. The sediment where the contamination is. This
dark line here depicts the low permeability portion of the cap, which is a GCL liner, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. And then there's armor stone placed over the top of that to protect that from any shear forces from the high water flows. Riprap exists there now. I skipped this. That riprap will be removed so that the cap system can be installed under all the way up to the Regis sheet pile, and then the riprap will be reinstalled. The GCL, which is a geosynthetic composite liner, I always thought it was called clay liner, but Kip corrected me today, is made of, it comes on a 15-foot by 150-foot long roll. It's only about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch thick, and it's got bentonite clay sandwiched basically between geotextile. And the bentonite clay, when it gets hydrated, becomes very impermeable and basically doesn't allow water to flow through it. And this just shows that this is some land photos of the clay liner being rolled out on land, which we're going to be doing that in the water. Here's a view of a liner being installed in the water. So it gets rolled out across the water and then gets weighted down to the bottom. So they'll set on the bottom of the river. Then after the GCL is laid down, it will be covered with armor stone to basically hold it in place and protect it from erosion. And this picture shows an example of a sheet pile installation going in the water. So you can see, I talked about crane mats. Crane mats are installed. In this case, they were installed to be above water for a while, but they're actually under the water out here. That's what the crane or the excavator will drive on to install the sheet pile, and you can see the sheet pile being installed out here with this fiber hammer. For the installation of the containment systems, each SMA2 and SMA3 will take about 3 weeks to install the sheet pile and the caps, and SMA6 will take about 6 weeks because of the footprint size. And I believe that's it. If there's any questions? Yes?
Manning, view of the flooding event we had back in April, and all the debris going down the river, was that disrupted at all, or?
Yeah, well, it was probably all filled in. According to our monitoring, we were monitoring it through the year last year, and it was pretty much all filled in by December when we quit monitoring because of weather conditions. We were asked by the agency to kind of do an inspection of it. We have routine monitoring that we're going to be doing on our caps. It's part of our program. But we did some spot inspections last week of all of the caps, not just the CCS cap, but also the armor stone caps, and everything checked out to be fine.
Right. What are the predicted half-lives for these, and what's the basis on making those predictions?
The half-life of what?
These mats. Predict that they're going to last, and the predictions based upon.
From my understanding, as long as they're covered and they're not exposed to the sunlight, the material will last an extremely, I don't know what the half-life answer is, but it basically will stay there indefinitely.
So what volume of in-apple have you pumped out so far? Do you have any idea how much is there to be pumped out?
I should have looked up my trivia before I came. I believe we have pumped out around 2,400 gallons. Does that sound right, Al? The majority of that came from one location, We found, you know, probably 90% of that in one location. And we believe we have made a very significant dent on that. I mean, the volume that we were getting out of that well at the end of last year had reduced significantly. And that's the first area, that's the first SMA, which was SMA 2. So I was going to tell this to Al tomorrow, but he'll get it ahead of time. So when we went out there, that's the first place we installed wells this year, and we found that the level of DNAPL and the volume that we were getting out this year was exactly where we left off last year. So we think we have, you know, it's hard to say exactly how much more, but we think we've gotten the majority of it through the course of last year. But it's still a very slow process.
And what happens to it once it's out?
Once it's out, it's all containerized, and it's containerized either in small containers or buckets with an absorball. So there's no free liquid in with it in that container. And then it's sent to the Dow incinerator. Yes.
Is this, does it seem to be, you know, mixed with water, or what you're pulling up is like within some kind of lens? I forgot from last year.
Well, the DNAPL is material that's heavier than water, so it has gone down through the sediments, basically, and is pooled on the till. And the till is a low permeability material, so it basically stops and gets trapped on top of the till. And so when we're pumping it out, we're trying to pump out, basically, it's a free product. It's not mixed with water. As we pump it out and we empty the well, we will start pumping water, and that's when we'll shut it off and let the well set and let it recover for removal the next day.
Any other comments, questions? All right,
Thank you.
Brian?
One more, as you go ahead with all of these remediations, I was just curious if you have data yet on tissue levels of dioxins in aquatic life, such as fish. I assume you're monitoring the aquatic wildlife. I know fish is a big issue.
We're certainly working with the agencies to develop a fish monitoring program. We don't expect that we'll see changes overnight in
Yeah, I
that. So
expect that too. I'm wondering if you're seeing any changes yet or not. Probably not.
we haven't really, we've got some baseline data, but we really haven't got any additional data since the implementation of some of these programs to compare to. Is that fair, accurate, Al?
Thank you, Todd.